Welcome to Xini Pulse.
Today, we are diving deep into a piece of advice that, let's be honest, kind of feels like a punch to the gut. Never put too much trust in friends. We're going to break down this really fascinating and, controversial idea about power, trust, and betrayal. Okay, so here it is, law number 2 from Robert Greene's infamous book, The 48 Laws of Power. I mean, this one really makes you stop and think, right? It sounds so cynical, but at the same time, there's something weirdly compelling about it.
So what's the deal? Is this some secret key to navigating the world, or is it just a recipe for paranoia and ultimately loneliness? In this explainer, we're going to look at the persuasive logic behind the law, using Green's own examples, and then we're going to flip the script and see how this ancient wisdom holds up against modern science.
First, let's really try to get inside the mindset of this law. Why has this piece of advice grabbed so many people for so long? What's the core argument for being so wary of the people who are supposed to be your closest allies?
So here's the core idea. Greene is basically arguing that the emotional baggage that comes with friendship makes it a huge liability. Personal feelings get in the way of clear judgment, and they create this perfect breeding ground for resentment. An enemy, though, they operate on a much cleaner slate. Their loyalty has to be earned, not just assumed, so they are constantly trying to prove their worth to you. And what's really interesting is how Greene builds his case here. He points out that friends often bite their tongue. They hide their true feelings just to keep the peace. They might say they love your new idea when they actually hate it. So you get this hidden layer of dishonesty. And then you've got envy and ingratitude. When you promote a friend, you can accidentally create a monster who starts to feel entitled to your success. And to really hammer this point home, Greene doesn't just rely on psychology. He pulls from history. And there is one story that is just a chilling, perfect example of this law in action. This story is just the perfect storm. It all starts out so well, right? Emperor Michael III elevates this stable boy, Bacillus, after he saves his life. He showers him with gifts and, totally against everyone's advice, promotes him to a position of incredible power. Michael chose his buddy over a qualified person, but watch how this turns. When the emperor needs help later on, the whole power dynamic has flipped. Bacillus is now a powerful man himself, and he just says no. That friendship curdles into ambition, and he stops seeing his old friend as a benefactor and starts seeing him as an obstacle. And the story ends with the ultimate betrayal, murder. And this quote right here, it just nails the psychological trap. The person you helped wants to believe they earned their success all on their own. The fact that they owe it all to you becomes the secret weight, a constant reminder of their dependency. And that can fester into resentment and, well, you know how the story ends. So if friends are a potential landmine, what's the move? Well, Greene gives us the story of Emperor Sung of China. Instead of relying on his generals, his friends, who he figured would probably betray him, he turned his rivals into his biggest supporters. By defeating an enemy and then, out of nowhere, showing them mercy, he turned their fear into this powerful kind of gratitude. A former enemy has everything to prove and absolutely nothing to take for granted. Okay, so the historical stuff is pretty convincing, right? The logic is seductive. But these are very specific, isolated stories. So let's shift gears and see how this ancient advice holds up when we look at it through the lens of modern science and strategic research. And what we find here is a completely different picture. From game theory to evolutionary biology, the data is pretty overwhelming. Trust-based, cooperative strategies are just more successful over the long haul than strategies built on constant suspicion. Let's just put this side by side. Greene's law says never trust friends. Science says that's actually inefficient. Why? Because building relationships from scratch takes time and energy, and a history of cooperation is actually a pretty good predictor of what someone will do next. And the whole use your enemies idea, it's incredibly risky. You might think you've won them over, but you could just be giving them a front row seat to take you down.
And the evidence for this is just everywhere. Robert Axelrod's famous computer tournaments showed again and again that simple, cooperative strategies like tit for tat consistently beat out the more aggressive, backstabbing ones. And it's not just us humans. Primatologists like Robert Sapolsky have shown that even alpha chimpanzees don't rule by brute force. They keep their top spot through a complex web of social alliances. A network of allies isn't a liability, it's a power multiplier.
So you can see we've got two fundamentally opposing views here. Greene sees relationships as being loaded with envy and hidden dangers. Modern strategy sees them as the very foundation of efficiency and long-term success.
One philosophy tells you to watch your back, the other tells you to build a team you can actually count on.
So who's right, the Machiavellian historian or the modern scientist? Well, the most powerful answer might not be about picking a side at all. It might be about understanding that power is all about context.
And this is the key insight you have to get. The 48 laws of power aren't like the laws of physics. They're observations pulled from the world of monarchies, royal courts, and battlefields. These are environments with absolute life-or-death power struggles. If you apply them rigidly in, say, a modern office or creative team, you could have a disaster on your hands.
So the real skill isn't about blindly following a rule. It's what you might call strategic calibration. The big takeaway isn't never trust friends, but maybe it's work with the competent. It's about seeing that, yeah, Emperor Michael's story is a huge warning about envy, but Emperor Sung's story is a masterclass in building strategic alliances. True power is knowing when to be cautious and when to build a bridge. And that brings us right to the heart of it all. This entire analysis really just boils down to a single strategic choice that you and only you have to make. This is the fundamental question, isn't it? It's right at the core of Law 2. And your answer doesn't just define your strategy, it kind of defines the world you choose to live in. Are you going to build your power on the strong foundation of proven trust? Or are you going to wield it on the sharp but very fragile edge of calculated leverage? The choice ultimately is yours.
Control your mind, or it controls you.